Greetings all. As I'm sure you may be aware, I live stream with the Dungeon Delver on Tuesdays. If you haven't caught that in our AD&D game, feel free, link in the description. We were discussing, at least in brief, a video here by Matthew Mercer, or at least a clip of one of his GM advice sections, where he says if there's an object in your narrative that you've built to trigger a vision of the past or something, and your players go, all right, the room seems clear, we can leave. You then step in and say, as you're about to turn over your shoulder, you feel this tugging sensation, a whisper in your ear as you glance back in the shadow. The gem seems to glow a little brighter than the rest of the darkness around it. And there, he's not making the player walk in and touch the gem or anything like that, but he's kind of narratively pointing the gem out for a second time. You can see the exact script scrolling past as this video goes. Well, Bill had some negative thoughts about seizing control from your players, which I think is absolutely valid. However, my coworker and I here want to present a couple of ideas, our thoughts on this, because it's kind of like I agree with Matt a little bit. My coworker Brad here agrees with Bill in certain respects, and so do I. So we kind of sit somewhere between these two extremes, where Mercer's in one side and Bill's on the other. So first, a couple of my thoughts. One is that from a DM perspective, a new DM perspective, if you forgot to describe this gem as they walk in the room, because let's face it, sometimes we just forget, right? It might be of benefit for you to pause and say, hey, guys, I'm sorry, I forgot there's this gem. I know that makes it seem super obvious or whatever, and here it is, it's in this room. And what Mercer said is kind of an obvious way of doing that in a more narrative sense and covering up your mistake. Number two is if you have neophyte players, or you yourself are a neophyte dungeon master, and this is the only trigger you have for the adventure, then having them notice the trigger is really important. Now, Brad's going to have some commentary on that in a sec. I would recommend, instead of taking control, like Mercer says, to, just start the adventure with you saying, hey, you've walked in this store, somebody got your attention, you've picked up a gem, and this is what happens, right? Now, that itself is already railroading the players, but if any of you have played Chateau d'Amberville, what happens? They get lost on their way to an adventure, they end up on top of a hill, their donkey walks into the mist, the donkey dies because either the mist is toxic or it's toxic to donkeys, and then they end up in the, open foyer. If that doesn't sound railroady, I don't know what does, and if that's acceptable to you as a player, I also think that seeing the gem and you as a DM saying, hey, your adventure starts where you go in this store and find this gem, you should probably also find that acceptable, at least a little bit. But that's old modules aside. The Keep on the Borderlands does the same thing with you starting down the road to the keep. You see the keep in the distance, right? You're not starting somewhere else. So, point number three, if you have players who are neurodivergent, that are not taking the hint, that they just kind of gloss over and they don't even search the room, or they don't think to search the room, it might be wise to give them a freebie. It might be wise to say, hey, while you, the players, didn't necessarily think to do this, your characters might think to search the room, and then back off. Or, quite simply, prompt them with, are you doing anything? Do you search the room? Do you look around? And that may remind them, hey, we need to do this thing. Or, quite simply, if the object is so obvious they should not have missed it, that then you might try Mercer's method. I don't recommend doing this all the time, but for those of us who disassociate, for those who miss an important detail in a sea of unimportant details like myself because of ADHD, etc., those who, even some normal, quote-unquote, able-bodied players or able-minded players, those normies, quote-unquote, I hope you can hear the contempt for all those terms, they may even miss some of this important information, because there's, let's face it, nothing more frustrating than trying to play an RPG and go through this adventure when the players just don't get what's going on. The players get frustrated and bored. The DM gets frustrated and bored. Sometimes the DM just has to move the story along, even if it's not very graceful. Let alone my fourth topic, which we'll get to after Brad's thoughts. I've made him wait long enough. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
I agree completely with Bill's attitude that a DM should never, ever try to steer a party. However, in a situation where the adventure hinges upon a certain aspect, as an example, we can use Matt Mercer's jewel and say that examining this jewel is of paramount importance to what the DM has set up. Well, it isn't necessary for one trigger. Matter of fact, to just use one trigger is really a mistake. You should set up multiple triggers. As an example, in a prior room or in a room that is in close proximity to the room with the jewel, there should be, as an example, a missive. I have looked at this particular jewel and something seems to be extremely odd about it. That is in one room. In another room, you could have, as an example, a setting that is quite obviously missing a jewel. You could have various other triggers that, no matter pretty much where the party goes, they're going to find a trigger. Thereby, we could say that, yes, the DM is definitely steering a party, but is not directly steering the party. They always have an opportunity to ignore everything, in which case the DM should have another adventure set up, that the party is going to be working with. Okay, I think that should be good enough. And Than, what else do you have?
I actually have two more points. One is that sometimes it's unfair to assume a DM has multiple adventures prepped, particularly if they are a new DM, or if they're just strapped for time, low on spoons, even just maybe they only had this one narrative hook, prepared. Now, that said, that's an excuse that many veteran DMs will find almost repugnant, but more narrative-driven DMs probably will tend to agree with, that it's unfair to expect a DM to have multiple adventures prepped. That's a debate for sandbox versus narrative play. You and I, and of course Bill, are sandbox DMs, meaning we have multiple adventures going pretty much all at once, ready all at the same time, to give players the idea of explore. My final point here is when magic is involved, right? What Mercer's getting at maybe is that the jewel is magical and there's some kind of compulsion there, and we might excuse the DM's overreach as being because of a magical compulsion. I've had player characters under the effects of magic or fear, and as part of that, the player has reacted sometimes very repugnantly. I moon the demon, I flip off the demon, I curse his name, whatever. And I've had to step in as a DM and say, no, you don't. You're breaking the scene, and your character could not do that. It is physically impossible for you to respond with anything other than flight, cowering, etc., whatever. Those moments to me feel bad as a DM. They really do, because I feel like I shouldn't have to do that. But sometimes I think when it comes to magical compulsions, and Bill just did this last week, this past Tuesday, with that succubus. We didn't have a chance to intervene. We didn't have a chance to stop him, right? The succubus charmed a guy and kissed one of our party members all in the same round without us being able to do a thing to stop him. In my opinion, that was taking control out of that player's hands. before he could do anything, all simply because he failed one roll. But that discussion of how much leeway does a DM give, where do we play with that dial, is a discussion for another day.
This is one where I definitely do agree with Bill as opposed to Matt, in that Matt seems to be steering a little too much. Like I said, I much prefer the multiple trigger approach, which still will guarantee, a result. But that's only my view.
So I think we both agree, and well, at least I somewhat agree with Mercer's approach, Brad and Bill did not. I'm looking forward, Bill, to see your response to my thoughts here. And as always, y'all, I will see you next time.